India's Voice to the World. I'm Mark Lynn. Namaskar. Coming up in the next hour. India to host the second Voice of the Global South Summit in virtual format. It will focus on sharing key outcomes achieved at the G20 meetings under India's presidency. Israeli army says that it finds a tunnel and weapons at Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital. A body of a hostage is also found from a building adjacent to the hospital.
Shaft inside AI Shifa hospital. The engineering forces destroyed the infrastructure.
Australia wins low-scoring semi-final against South Africa in Kolkata to set up a title clash with India on Sunday at Ahmedabad. India will host the second Voice of the Global South Summit on the 17th of November. It will be held virtually, and India is committed to consolidating its collaborations and convergences within the Global South. The summit provides a platform to discuss the outcomes from the various G20 meetings during India's presidency as well. The first summit had seen 125 nations participate. That summit in January of 2023 had provided a diverse range of perspectives on the Global South. DD India's Akshay Dongre reports.
India will be hosting the second summit of the Global South nations on 17th November. The Voice of the Global South Summit will be held in virtual mode and in continuation with the first Voice of Global South Summit held in January during India's G20 presidency.
This would be an opportunity, tomorrow's summit, for sharing with the countries of the Global South the key outcomes achieved in various G20 meetings over the course of India's presidency. You would recall that during the first Voice of Global South Summit in January, this is one of the things that we did. Part of what Prime Minister had said, reach out, hear the voices of the Global South and see how we can mainstream that, give them more attention and put them on the high tables. I think we have been able to do that, and I think this is a good opportunity to tell members of the Global South what has been really developments over our presidency.
During the fourth summit of the unique initiative, leaders from 125 countries of the Global South came together to share their perspectives and priorities on a common platform. The second Voice of Global South Summit will be structured into 10 sessions. The inaugural and concluding sessions would be at head of state government level and hosted by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The theme of the inaugural leaders session will be Together for Everyone's Growth with Everyone's Trust, and that of the concluding leaders session is Global South, Together for One Future. In addition, there will be 8 ministerial level sessions with the following themes: Foreign Minister Session, India and Global South Emerging Together for a Better Future; Education Minister Session, Making Human Resources Future Ready; Finance Minister Session, Financing People-Centric Development; Environment Minister Session, Sustainable Solutions for Climate Resilience and Climate Finance; Second Foreign Minister Session, Global South and One Development; Energy Minister Session, Affordable and Inclusive Energy Transition for Sustainable Development; Health Minister Session, Solution from Global South for One Health; and Commerce Trade Minister Session, Global South and Resilient Supply Chain. The second Voice of Global South Summit come at a time of increasing conflicts in various parts of the world, extreme weather patterns due to climate change, and rising socio-economic challenges that disproportionately hinder the growth of the developing and underdeveloped world. The summit aims to bring together the Global South on a common platform to tackle these challenges. Akshay Dongre, DD India.
And DD India correspondent Jessica Taneja is following this story. She joins us now from the newsroom. Jessica, India has championed the cause of the Global South during its 2023 G20 presidency. How does this meeting take that forward?
Well, there are various agendas and initiatives that were discussed during the G20 that will be taken forward by this virtual meet of the Voice of the Global South. And as you've seen in the past as well, India has raised 3 key concerns that is affecting the economies and predominantly the countries of the global south, particularly 3 Cs, COVID, conflict, and of course climate change. While India wants to be an instrumental player when it comes to transfer of technologies and as well as building resilient supply chains. And as you've seen in the past, Mark, you've heard the External Affairs Minister also point out some time back that it is almost that these countries are at the mercy of supplies from certain countries, and this kind of dependence and not being able to produce or even have their own technological innovations to have those kind of resources at hand is preventing them from becoming emerging economies, and they're continuing to be recipients of both technology and other crucial supplies, and this kind of dependence is what stops and prevents their growth. So India wants to help these countries become more sustainable, more self-reliant, and of course drive their economic engine by addressing those very specific needs, and India right now stands at that position to do so. It is projected to be the 3rd largest economy, and if you look at the numbers, India will be in a decent position to be able to help countries foster that kind of growth, Mark.
And Jessica, is it likely that this, this exchange is going to become more regular and institutionalized? It's already the 2nd such meeting, and of course, India did take up the agenda of the Global South during the G20 presidency as well.
That's right, and it was done with more emphasis than in any other G20 platforms that we have seen. If you notice, even the G20 presidency now goes to Brazil, from Indonesia to India to Brazil. The focus with all the optics in place has been on the Global South. And of course, with Brazil also, we expect that the issues that India has sort of brought to light under its presidency will be taken forward and will be deliberated upon in detail, specifically talking about the induction of African Union and of course raising concerns that these countries have been asking to see sort of prevail more dominantly than the other issues that are outnumbered by the global north. So, of course, these little initiatives that India has put forward, especially when it comes to providing technological innovation, building resilient supply chains, and, of course, helping and aiding these countries with resources, and, of course, establishing more technological and more scientific innovations and collaborations to build those countries rather than let them be recipients and be at the mercy, as Dr. S. Jaishankar pointed out, of few countries.
We leave it there. Thank you very much, Jessica. Jessica Taneja is covering that story for us, and she'll be continuing to give us inputs during the day. Now, India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh attended the 10th ASEAN Defence Ministers Meeting Plus, or ADMM Plus, in Jakarta, Indonesia. India pressed for ASEAN and Plus countries to work together to ensure peace, prosperity and security in the region. The meeting comes at a time when fighting between the army and insurgent groups in Myanmar has forced refugees into India's northeastern state of Mizoram, and Indonesia handed over the chairmanship as well of the ADMM to Laos. Fuzail Ahmed reports.
India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh reiterated India's commitment to freedom of navigation, overflight and unimpeded lawful commerce in the international waters in accordance with international laws. The Indian minister's comments came at the 10th ASEAN Defence Ministers Meeting Plus in Jakarta, Indonesia on Thursday. The Indian minister reiterated India's commitment to work with ASEAN and Plus countries to ensure peace, prosperity and security, which is an apt theme for the year's ADMM Plus. India also proposed to co-chair the expert working group on counter-terrorism. This proposal was endorsed by the ADMM Plus as terrorism remains a serious concern to countries in the region. The Indian Defence Minister also held a meeting with the Indonesian Defence Minister Prabowo Subianto in Jakarta. The defence chiefs of two nations recommitted to further strengthen cooperation, particularly in the maritime domain. The Indian Defence Minister also met Vietnamese Defence Minister General Phan Vang Yang. The leaders reviewed progress in implementation of the joint vision statement on Indian-Vietnam defence partnership towards 2030. In another development, Indonesia officially handed over the chairmanship of ASEAN Defence Ministers Meeting to Laos, the last of the cohort of meetings during its ASEAN chairmanship.
We have witnessed the Lao PDR's commitment to regional peace and stability. Therefore, I am confident that under its leadership, the ADMM will continue to flourish. I have full faith in the capabilities, wisdom, and the leadership of the Lao PDR's Minister of National Defense.
The annual meeting came as conflict rages in Middle East and Ukraine. Indonesia's Defense Minister Prabowo Subianto held separate bilateral talks with Russian Vice Minister of Defense Alexander Fomin and US Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin on the sidelines of ASEAN Defense Ministers meeting in Jakarta. Fuzail Ahmed reporting for DD India.
The Indian Minister of Earth Sciences Kiren Rijiju arrived in the Maldives on Thursday for an official two-day visit. He's representing India at the President's swearing-in ceremony. Dr. Mohammad Muizu is going to be sworn in as the new President of the Maldives today. Dr. Muizu defeated the incumbent President Ibrahim Mohamed Soleh in the recent runoff elections that were held in September. The Indian leader's representation there underlines the importance of the regional partnership that India has fostered through SAGAR, which is security and growth for all in the region, as well as the neighborhood first policy. And Kiren Rijiju met the outgoing President Soleh and highlighted the depth and progress of the India-Maldives bilateral relationship that has grown over the last few years. The Parliament Secretariat of Maldives has confirmed that dignitaries from 46 countries will be participating in this inauguration ceremony. And here's an update now on the Israel-Hamas conflict. The Israeli military has said that it has uncovered a Hamas tunnel shaft at Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital complex. The army said that its troops had found a vehicle in the hospital containing a large number of weapons. The military also made public these videos and photographs of the tunnel shaft and weapons.
The army forces found underground shaft inside AI Shifa hospital. The engineering forces destroyed the infrastructure. We also found in the hospital Hamas vehicle that was ready to be part of the October 7 attack, but did not go on the road, and inside it was a huge amount of arms.
Israel's military said that soldiers had found the body of an Israeli hostage who was taken into Gaza by Hamas in its attack last month. Israel's military spokesperson said that the body of Yehudit Weiss, one of the hostages taken by Hamas gunmen, was recovered by troops in a building near Al-Shafi Hospital in Gaza.
The body of Yehudit, may her soul rest in peace, was recovered by our forces. The 7th Brigade, which was scanning the area nearby the Al-Shifa hospital, recovered her body in one of the homes during the scanning. Near her body, we found bodies of terrorists who were holding Yehudit.
And Israel has said that the military uncovered significant material in its operation at the Al-Shifa hospital. Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said that its commandos were still searching through Al-Shifa hospital. He added that the operation to wipe out Hamas terrorists is being done in a precise, selective but a very determined manner.
There are significant findings there. The operation continues and it is done in a precise, selective but very determined manner. The more we deepen this operation, increase the pressure on Hamas and erode more headquarters, damage more tunnels, eliminate more operatives and bring down more heads of organizations, the greater the chances of returning our hostages. Because the enemy only understands power, and we explain to him very well what power is.
Mobile phone and internet services have gone down across the Gaza Strip. This is due to a lack of fuel for backup generators. Telecom firms said that all energy sources sustaining their networks were depleted, and an internet monitor confirmed a major outage. With communications out and in the absence of fuel, the UN agency, the refugee agency UNRWA, said that it will be unable to send trucks to pick up aid supplies for Gazans from the border with Egypt from Friday onwards. Early on Wednesday, the first fuel tanker arrived in Gaza since the conflict began last month. Still to come here on DD India News Hour. Finland is to close some border crossings with Russia to deter asylum seekers. The International Court of Justice is due to pass a ruling on alleged ethnic cleansing of Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh. And catastrophic flood risks drives people off a small Greek village to seek relocation.
Turning crisis into opportunity, transforming ideas into action, stories of real change, tales of sustainable solution. This series is going to tell stories of such changemakers. Watch Changemakers on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Mark Lynn. The UK's Foreign Secretary David Cameron visited Ukrainian port city of Odessa on his first trip abroad after taking charge. Cameron met with his Ukrainian counterpart Dmitry Kuleba while visiting Ukraine's Navy vessels in Odessa city, a regular target of Russian airstrikes. Cameron pledged to continue providing military support for Ukraine's war effort until it's victorious in the war with Russia.
З того часу не було вже атак?
Well, Russian shelling on Thursday killed 2 civilians and injured at least 12 in southern Ukraine's Kherson region. Kherson and the western bank of the Dnipro River areas have been regularly bombarded by Russian troops from Dnipro's eastern bank. Ukrainian officials this week said that their forces had crossed the river and were operating on the eastern bank. A Ukrainian storming brigade on Thursday published footage which it said showed its fighters capturing Russian trenches near the city of Bakhmut in the eastern Ukraine. The video shows soldiers arriving in an armored personnel carrier at the stretch of forest and having a firefight with other troops. Russia captured Bakhmut theater of some of the deadliest fighting, bloodiest fighting in the last 20 months. In May 2023, and Ukraine launched a counter-offensive in June. It was aimed at retaking occupied land in the country south and east, including in Bakhmut. The U.S. Treasury Department on Thursday imposed sanctions on 3 United Arab Emirates-based maritime companies and vessels, accusing them of engaging in export of Russian crude oil, priced above $60 a barrel. That was a cap that was set. Now, the U.S. Other Group 7 countries, that's G7 countries, and Australia had imposed this cap last year, seeking to reduce Russia's revenues from seaborne oil exports as part of sanctions for its invasion of Ukraine. The UAE-based firms targeted are Kazan Shipping Incorporated, Progress Shipping Company Limited, and Gallon Navigation Incorporated. Thursday's action, it comes after the US in October had imposed its first sanctions on owners of tankers carrying Russian oil priced above the cap, one in Turkey and one in the United Arab Emirates. Russian artist Alexander Skochilenko, who replaced supermarket price tags with messages calling for an end to Moscow's war in Ukraine, was jailed for 7 years on Thursday for knowingly spreading false information about the Russian army. The 33-year-old Alexander Skochilenko is an artist from St. Petersburg, and she wanted to stop Ukraine's conflict and appealed to the judge for compassion, wisdom, and to set her free. The artist, who has already spent over a year and a half in prison, has denied the formal charge of knowingly spreading false information about the army. Finland will close some crossings on the border with Russia on Friday. The Prime Minister, Petteri Orpo, said on Thursday that 4 crossing points in the south would close at midnight on Friday, while 2 in the north are going to be staying open for asylum applications. Neighboring Norway, which shares a border with Russia in the Arctic, is also ready to close its border at short notice if necessary.
Well, Finland shares a 1,300-kilometre border with Russia. It is the largest border of any neighbouring European nation. But the President of Finland has announced that he will be ordering the closure of 4 of the country's 9 official border crossings. Now, the reason he says he is doing this is because the country is experiencing a surge in immigrants trying to cross the border from Russia. He has accused Moscow of engineering a problem with asylum seekers in order to enact revenge on Finland for its cooperation with the United States and NATO. What we are hearing from Helsinki is that there has been a large surge in people coming from third countries, in other words, people from outside of Europe arriving at that border with Finland claiming asylum. The Finnish are saying that the Russians are helping them get to the border as part of a scheme, as I say, in order to try and play geopolitical games, according to the government in Finland. Now, it is important to note this is not just happening in Finland, it's also happening in neighbouring Norway. The government there has suggested it too may be about to close its border with Russia because of a big spike in people arriving at its border claiming asylum. And this is not necessarily a new problem in Europe. We have seen this type of action before when immigrants were travelling through Belarus in order to try and gain entry to Poland, again a European Union country. And for people caught in the crosshairs of this, they are quite often desperate people trying to gain asylum or migration rights to the European Union, but they find themselves really caught up in a game of geopolitical chess between the EU and Russia. So moving forward as we go into the winter, we know conditions there are very, very tough for people trying to cross illegally. But what we are hearing is that governments across Europe are going to treat this problem very, very seriously. And if it comes to it, close the borders with Russia completely. Trent Murray for DD India, Berlin.
The United Nations Stop Court will hand down its ruling on Friday on a case which was brought by Armenia against Azerbaijan. Armenia wants the court to put restrictive measures in place to prevent what they call the ethnic cleansing of Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh, a claim that Azerbaijan denies. Here's Alex Kadia's report from Brussels.
It's now nearly 2 months since Azerbaijani forces stormed into Nagorno-Karabakh, uprooting the local self-proclaimed Republic of Artsakh, which had close ties with Armenia. What followed was the exodus of more than 100,000 ethnic Armenians from the region, leaving shattered lives behind. Armenia now says the few that remain are at risk of ethnic cleansing at the hands of Azerbaijani troops, and it wants the International Court of Justice to step in. Armenia is asking the ICJ to put in place 10 provisional measures aimed at protecting the rights of ethnic Armenians from that Nagorno-Karabakh region. The head of Armenia's legal team says nothing other than targeted and unequivocal provisional measures protecting the rights of ethnic Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh will suffice to prevent the ethnic cleansing Azerbaijan is perpetrating from continuing and becoming irreversible. Meanwhile, Azerbaijan has strenuously denied all of Armenia's allegations. The country's deputy foreign minister, Elnur Mammadov, said Azerbaijan has not engaged and will not engage in ethnic cleansing or any form of attack on the civilian population of Karabakh. The International Court of Justice is currently working through two similar cases linked to the decades-long conflict between the two sides. In 2021, Armenia filed a claim accusing Azerbaijan of breaching the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. Shortly thereafter, Azerbaijan filed a counterclaim accusing Armenia of doing the same thing. The legal wranglings between an emboldened Azerbaijan and a weakened Armenia will likely carry on beyond this ruling, a ruling which even the court will have no practical way to enforce. Alex Kadier in Brussels reporting for DD India.
Well, as Argentina gears up for the runoff election scheduled to take place on Sunday, the Argentinian presidential candidate Javier Milei wraps up his electoral campaign with an event at the city of Cordoba. Milei was joined on stage by the former presidential candidate and high-profile right-wing politician Patricia Bullrich, who lost in the first round of the election. The 53-year-old self-proclaimed anarcho-capitalist is now pollsters' narrow favorite to win against his opponent, Sergio Massa. Clashes broke out between protesters and riot police in Spain's capital, Madrid, on Thursday, after the Socialist Workers' Party reached a deal with the Catalan separatist Junts party for government support. Spain's parliament had voted to make Pedro Sanchez the prime minister for another term on Thursday, ending a protracted deadlock after an inconclusive general election in July. Sanchez's Spanish Socialist parties reached separate deals, in fact, with a number of regional parties, and they are to earn their backing. Let's take a look now at other stories making news around the world. A fire broke out in a warehouse in Mexico City's central borough, resulting in a plume of black smoke filling the skyline. Civil protection authorities confirmed no casualties and evacuated hundreds of people. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York has seized the largest ever counterfeit goods seizure in the United States' history, involving 219,000 luxury products. They are valued at $1.3 billion. Two people were arrested in Manhattan. The charges carry a maximum prison sentence of 10 years. Police in Ventura County, California, arrested Loe Al-Naji on suspicion of manslaughter for the death of a Jewish man who fell to the ground during pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian street demonstrations earlier this month. The incident occurred during the ongoing street protests over the military conflict between Israel and the Palestinian terrorist group Hamas. Greek farming village Metamorphosi is considering relocation following September's devastating floods. The village, located in the Thessaly Plain, is expected to retain its name and store farm machinery in old buildings. The Civil Engineering Department cites repeated flooding and geomorphology as reasons for the move. The village's 240 residents are mostly cotton farmers, and they've moved in with relatives and at rented nearby towns. Well, still to come here on DD India News Hour. Is the United Nations brokered first ever binding plastic pollution agreement in sight? With the UN predicting 9% rise in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, a senior scientific officer at the WMO will tell us more. And SpaceX's second Starship launch will take on November 18. Stay tuned to know how it will work.
Turning crisis into opportunity, transforming ideas into action, stories of real change, tales of sustainable solution.
This series is going to tell stories of such changemakers.
Watch Changemakers on DD India.
Watching DD India News Hour, I'm Mark Lynn. Here's a recap of our main stories. India will be hosting the second Voice of the Global South Summit in virtual format. It's going to focus on sharing key outcomes achieved at the G20 meetings under India's presidency. And Israeli army says that it finds a tunnel and weapons at Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital. The body of a hostage is also found from a building adjacent to the hospital. Australia win a low-scoring semi-final against South Africa, and Kolkata to set up a title clash with India on Sunday at Ahmedabad in the Cricket World Cup. A powerful storm with hurricane-force wind gusts poured over a foot of rain on South Florida, flooding homes, streets, power lines and trees. And tens of thousands of homes and businesses were left without power, with over 86,000 homes and businesses without power across Miami-Dade, Broward and Palm Beach counties. The storm reached over 100,000 outages. A large group of international negotiators and United Nations representatives are meeting in Nairobi, Kenya, to come up with an international treaty to tackle the world's plastic pollution problem. According to the United Nations, less than 10% of the plastic waste created globally has been recycled. Interlocutors, they are hoping to reach a consensus on a legally binding agreement by next year. Here's Will Denselo's report from New York.
An estimated 430 million tonnes of plastic is produced every year, but the United Nations warns that 2/3 of it ends up thrown away. Scientists say this is creating an ecological crisis. The social and environmental cost of plastic pollution is estimated to be between $300 to $600 billion a year. And analysts expect plastic production to double over the next 2 decades. In a bid to turn the tide, negotiators from nations around the world gathered in Nairobi, Kenya this week as efforts continue to reach consensus on a treaty to address the threat of plastic pollution. This is the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee's 3rd session, as it continues work on a so-called zero draft text.
This means rethinking everything along the chain, from polymer to production, from product to packaging. We need to use fewer virgin materials, less plastic, and no harmful chemicals. We need to ensure that we use and reuse and recycle resources more efficiently and dispose safely of what is left over.
A key mission is to see the world move from a throwaway economy to a reuse economy. But deep divisions remain on issues including whether to focus on cuts to plastic production or just the management of plastic waste. The INC3 meeting is slated to wrap up on Sunday, before delegates reconvene for another round of talks in Canada in April. William Denslow in New York reporting for DD India.
The World Meteorological Organization warns of more extreme weather patterns and further sea level rise at least until 2060. The WMO released a report this week that shows that the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, the concentration has reached a record high last year, and it worries that this trend is going to continue. Here's Jody Jacob with a report from New York.
The World Meteorological Organization says greenhouse gases in the atmosphere once again reached a new record last year. It says the future looks bleak as there is no end in sight to the rising trend, which it says will result in more extreme weather conditions. The WMO says despite decades of warnings and dozens of climate conferences, the world is still heading in the wrong direction. I spoke to Dr. Oksana Tarasova, the WMO's senior scientific officer, and asked her how worried we should be.
If the actions are not taken, then it actually threatens the whole humanity, because you can imagine if you have every single cyclone turning into something like a hurricane category 4, there are limits to adaptation. We need to invest substantially in adaptation, knowing what is coming. But there is a lot of the feedback loops which we don't understand. So even adaptation, we are doing it like semi-blind, so like you see with one eye, and then you move forward based on your best science and best guess. But our tools are not perfect, and as I said, there are many systems which we don't observe. So that's why we are calling for more and more actions, and actually really actions and not just talking, because there's a lot of discussions which we see in the press which are about the climate commitments. What are we committed and what are we going to do? I think that we need to move from what we are going to do to what we have done.
So, Doctor, what do these increased numbers in greenhouse gases actually mean for the world that we live in?
Well, the meaning is pretty simple. The more greenhouse gases you have in the atmosphere, we call them greenhouse gases for the reason they trap the energy, the thermal energy in the atmosphere. So the more gases we have, you can imagine it's like a thicker and thicker glass over your greenhouse, so you actually heat the thing which is under the glass. So the main greenhouse gases are the main drivers of climate change. And because there's so much energy in the atmosphere releases the energy through extreme event. It's not like a slow cooking. It's really like either we're boiling or we are not boiling. So basically, you have an increased intensity of the extreme events, like droughts, more precipitation.
Doctor, so we're already so far down the road because the greenhouse gases end up remaining in the atmosphere for decades, if not centuries. So whatever we're going to be doing now is just going to slow the pace of global warming, right?
Indeed, the greenhouse gases do accumulate in the atmosphere. Let's say atmospheric methane has a pretty short lifetime relative to the other gases, so it's about 11 years. It's about 300 years, or let's say close to that. For some other gases, for nitrous oxide, it's about 100 years. For CO2, it's about 1,000 years. So, I mean, even in the 1,000 years, if you stop all emissions now, you would see some excess of CO2 in the atmosphere. So what should be, or what we should be prepared for is that at a certain point, as being projected by the IPCC, there will be a need to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. We will have to do it because even if you stop all the emissions, as you said, we accumulated so much, and it will take so long for the natural system to actually go back to the equilibrium. So we will go off the roof if we don't start doing that.
So you say that the talks need to end now and that action is needed. So what exactly should countries be doing?
There is a potential to use renewables. So you can triple the use of renewable. There's enough energy in the atmosphere which you can actually use. and you can double the energy efficiency.
And it's initiatives like the Indian-led International Solar Alliance that could potentially steer the world on the right path. The alliance of countries wants to invest in solar energy, and especially the developing world, and in so doing, increase the use of clean energy and reduce the reliance on greenhouse gases. Jody Jacobs in New York reporting for DD India.
Well, SpaceX is about to test its spacecraft flight for a second time as part of a wider mission with NASA to get humans back on the moon. And the first test flight, we remember, blew up minutes after takeoff, and it's taken months now to get regulators to clear another try. Here's Caroline Malone with a report from Washington.
SpaceX is hoping to be part of the next giant leap for mankind, 50 years after humans first went to the moon. A test window for the Starship spacecraft launch will open from Saturday, when the spacecraft is due to shoot up and then detach from its rocket. CEO Elon Musk said earlier in the year he sees about a 50% chance of it reaching orbital velocity, but even getting to stage separation is a win. That's better odds than when it first tested in April, when the Starship faltered within minutes after it took off and had to self-destruct, exploding over the Gulf of Mexico. Since then, SpaceX has had to wait for safety and environmental reviews, but has now been cleared by regulators to try again. The ultimate goal is for the spacecraft to play a part in NASA's Artemis moon mission, a return to the lunar surface in 2025. And even to put humans onto Mars for the first time. Caroline Malone in Washington reporting for DD India.
Music industry's top Latin music artists arrived for the Latin Grammy Awards in Spain's Seville on Thursday. For the first time, the event has not been held in the United States. Latin artists such as Maluma, Bizarrap and Pablo Alborán, they dazzled the red carpet at the Seville event. The big nominees for this year include artists like Shakira, Camilo and Karol G, as well as the Argentina Bizarrap and the Spaniard Pablo Alborán. The Latin Grammy Awards, they are handed out annually by the Latin Recording Academy. Well, in the Indian Himalayan state of Uttarakhand, the government and all the agencies involved are making every effort to rescue 40 workers trapped inside the collapsed under-construction tunnel. A heavy-duty drilling machine bored through 12 meters of rubble of the collapsed tunnel, and a 6-meter section of a steel pipe had been inserted into the bored passage to rescue the workers. The tunnel collapsed on November 12th in the early morning hours. Our correspondent Om Prakash Yadav is joining us with more on this story from Uttarkashi. Om Prakash, आज छठा दिन है, 21 मीटर तक ड्रिल कर लिया गया है. आपके पास क्या जानकारी है?
जी, ये बीते रविवार को जब से इस टनल में ये हादसा हुआ, उसके बाद से युद्ध स्तर पर कार्य जारी थे, लेकिन जो मशीनें थी वो काम नहीं कर पा रही थी। तो उसके बाद अमेरिकन ऑगर मशीन विशेष तौर से 130 हरकुलस विमान से मंगाई गई और उसके बाद केंद्र सरकार भी हरकत में आई और केंद्रीय मंत्री वीके सिंह कल यहाँ पहुँचे और केंद्रीय सड़क परिवहन राष्ट्रीय राजमार्ग सचिव अनुराग जैन भी यहाँ दिन भर रहे। उन्होंने उच्च स्तरीय अधिकारियों के साथ बैठक की और इसके कार्य में प्रगति लाने के लिए जो हर तरह की ज़रूरत थी कि जो सामान होते हैं, मशीनें होती है, तकनीकी एक्सपर्ट्स होते हैं, अंतर्राष्ट्रीय स्तर के विशेषज्ञ होते हैं, उनसे संवाद करवाने से संबंधित जितनी भी मदद की जरूरत थी सारी मदद के लिए आश्वासन दिया और तीव्र गति पर इस पर काम शुरू हुआ। और कल 11 बजे इस पर काम शुरू हुआ तो तकरीबन 4 बजे तक ये 12 मीटर तक इसकी ड्रिलिंग हो गई थी। रात 10 बजे तक 18 मीटर तक ड्रिलिंग हो गई थी, लेकिन रात्रि में कुछ हार्ड स्टोन आने और सॉफ्ट रॉक की वजह से इसमें कार्य में ज़्यादा गति नहीं रही, क्योंकि बहुत संवेदनशीलता के साथ इस काम को दूसरी तरफ से सॉफ्ट रॉक गिरने से वापस मलबा दब जाता है, तो वो काम बाधित हो जाता है। इसी वजह से उन्होंने धीरे धीरे काम किया, तो रात भर में तकरीबन 1.5 मीटर तक इसका ड्रिलिंग हो पाया और फिर सुबह बोरअली 2 मीटर और किया। इस तरह तकरीबन 21 मीटर तक ये इसकी ड्रिलिंग हो चुकी है और अभी 60 मीटर है, तो 39 मीटर तक का कार्य बाकी है, जिसके लिए भी काम जारी है। तो उम्मीद की जाती है कि अगले 35 से 40 घंटों में इसको काम को पूरा कर लिया जाएगा। लेकिन जहां तक चुनौतियों का मामला है, उसमें बीच में एक जो मशीन है, इक्विपमेंट्स है, वो भी कई फंसे हुए हैं। तो अगर वो आ जाएंगे तो उनको हटाने में अलग टाइम लगेगा। और जो पाइप 600 mm के पाइप लगाए जाते हैं, उनमें वेल्डिंग करने का कार्य और इनको इंस्टॉल करने का कार्य भी रहता है। तो इससे काम की गति थोड़ा धीमी हो रही है। और इसके अलावा क्या जो एक पहाड़ी का जो इलाका है, जहाँ से तकरीबन 4.5 किलोमीटर की सुरंग जा रही है, इसमें बीच की साइड में झरने की वजह से जो चीड़ और देवदार के वृक्ष लगे हुए हैं, वहाँ पर पानी का मूवमेंट भी रहता है। तो बहुत ही ये सिल्की और भीगा हुआ इलाका है। इस वजह से बहुत संवेदनशीलता के साथ इसमें काम को अंजाम देने की वजह से गति थोड़ी धीमी हो गई है। लेकिन उम्मीद की जाती है कि जिस तरह अमेरिकन ऑगर मशीन आई है और अंतर्राष्ट्रीय स्तर के विशेषज्ञ थाईलैंड, नॉर्वे से जुड़े तकनीकी एक्सपर्ट्स और जो भारत सरकार के और राज्य सरकारों के जो भूगर्भ वैज्ञानिक और जो सुरंगें बनाने में माहिर इंजीनियर होते हैं, वो सभी जी जान से लगे हुए हैं। NDRF, SRF और अन्य जो एजेंसियाँ हैं, जो हेल्पिंग हैंड बनी हुई है, वो भी इसमें लगी हुई है। तो उम्मीद की जाती है कि इस काम को आज दिन में थोड़ा तेजी आएगी और ये जितना फास्ट वर्क होगा उसका आगे गति पकड़ेगा, उम्मीद की जा रही है ऐसी। जी।
Right, thank you very much, Om Prakash, for that update. And Om Prakash has told us that the Minister V.K. Singh is on the site, and also the Road Secretary, Road Transport Secretary is there, and experts, they've been in touch with experts from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. yesterday. There was a lot of drilling that was done, but then they had some difficulty because they had encountered some hard rock, and then there was also soft rock, and he has talked about several unforeseen issues that could come up since it is a hilly terrain. And this is being done very carefully because it is, after all, also a fragile ecosystem in this hilly terrain, and hence they do not want to disrupt anything. The work is slowed down as a result of that, but he says that they are hopeful that in the next 30 to 40 hours, some progress, tangible progress will be made. Now, moving on to our next story, as air quality index remained in the severe category on Friday, the Delhi NCR again woke up under a hazardous smog cloud. What's happening is that there's been no development on the in the air quality. It's not improved because of unfavorable wind conditions and the absence of rainfall. So according to the Central Pollution Control Board, places like Anand Vihar, R.K. Puram, these are all places in the national capital Delhi, the Indira Gandhi Airport area, the Dwarka area, they are all reporting AQI figures, that's the air quality index figures, which have crossed the severe category of 400. Let's take a look at other stories making the news. Voting for the assembly elections has begun in the Indian states of Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, and voting in Madhya Pradesh is underway for all the 230 assembly seats in the state. The voters in Chhattisgarh are voting for the second phase of their state's election. The results are going to be announced on the 3rd of December. The Shilong Cherry Blossom Festival is being organized in the northeastern Indian state of Meghalaya. This is happening today, the 17th of November, and it's going to go on till the 19th of November. This festival is a celebration of culture, art and music. In fact, it offers a diverse range of activities from cosplay, competitions, as well as beauty pageants and choir contests, among other things. The Indian Army, in collaboration with the Border Roads Organization, the BRO, has successfully completed the construction of the Bailey Bridge. This is over the Teesta River in the northeastern state of Sikkim in India. It marks a significant milestone as the bridge, in fact, reconnects the flood-affected areas of North Sikkim with the mainland, re-establishing vital transportation links. They were cut off from the rest of the region because of the floods. India's Minister of Housing and Urban Affairs, Hardeep Singh Puri, launched the City Investments to Innovate, Integrate and Sustain. That is Cities 2.0. It's a challenge in New Delhi. So this initiative, what does it do? It aims to advance climate action through the promotion of a circular economy with a focus on integrated waste management. Still to come here on DD India News Hour. The US President Biden announces the progress on the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework with 13 APEC partners, including India, and much more. And the Starbucks Red Cup Day event is disrupted by staff going on strike.
Turning crisis into opportunity, transforming ideas into action, stories of real change, tales of sustainable solution.
This series is going to tell stories of such change makers.
Watch Change Makers on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. My name is Mark Lin. And now let's get you some business news. The US President Joe Biden on Thursday said that he would keep working to advance the Pacific Trade Pact, and even as his vision for a regional deal to counter China's influence, it stumbled over his bid to strengthen workers' rights. Hopes for an IPEF trade deal were dashed earlier this week. Biden also announced progress on the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework with 13 APEC partners. These include India. Well, as per the Deputy U.S. Trade Representative Sarah Bianchi, the U.S. and the Indo-Pacific partners, they need to regroup and recalibrate their trade pillar negotiations early next year. Workers at hundreds of Starbucks stores across the United States have walked off their jobs because of a promotional event on Thursday. They are demanding improved staffing and schedules. The walkout, it comes on the coffee chain's Red Cup event day, during which the Starbucks hands out free red-colored reusable holiday-themed cups to customers on their coffee purchases. But the Workers United feel that this event was one of the most infamously hard and understaffed days for them, as drink orders pile up and the employees end up at the receiving end of abuse from frustrated customers because of long wait times. So the union decided to call for a strike. It represents over 9,000 Starbucks employees at about 360 US stores. Well, in the Cricket World Cup, Australia are into the finals. The Aussies defeated South Africa by 3 wickets in the second semi-final in India's eastern city of Kolkata. Australia are going to meet India in the title clash on Sunday. The semi-final was a low-scoring affair. South Africa were bundled out for 212, with the Australian pacers Mitchell Starc and Josh Hazlewood wreaking havoc. And the Proteas at one stage were 24 for 4 wickets. David Miller then rose to the occasion, slamming a century and helping his side put up a decent 212 on the board. Australia started well, with Warner and Travis Head putting on 60 for the opening wicket in less than 7 overs. But then the going got tough, with Australia losing wickets at regular intervals thanks to some very tight bowling by Keshav Maharaj and Tabraiz Shamsi, making for a keen contest. But the Australian captain Cummins and fellow pacer Starc batted with some assurance towards the end to take their side over the line with nearly 3 overs to spare. And Arnold Thomas was watching that match yesterday, and he can put it into context for us and also set up the final, which is going to take place in Ahmedabad. Well, Arnold, were the Australians, throwing away the match? They had started with such, they started so well, but then they made the rest of their chase a little pretty difficult.
Good morning, Mark. It almost seems like the ghost of '96. The wicket that was for the India versus Sri Lanka, being brought back for this particular game. Batting on this particular track was difficult, but I think Travis Head and David Warner, the start that they got 60 runs in 6 overs, that took that blew South Africa away. South Africa missed a trick or two. Maybe getting the spinners on a bit early, second over, would have done the trick because they could have restricted Australia there, maybe pick a wicket or two, and this match could have been different. But now all is lost for South Africa. 4 years later, they can come back stronger and look at another way or window to, somewhere clear this knockout stage, because this is where South Africa, they look formidable, but stumble at this stage at every time in every World Cup.
Indeed, and also in 1999, Australia managed to get it past South Africa in the semi-final with a score which was actually just one run more than this, 213, and people were referring to that match. They went on then to meet Pakistan in the final. This is what we are going to see is a repeat of the 2003 final, and India against Australia, and it's time for India to take revenge.
You rightly mentioned the right match. If you see, it's just the opposite of what's happening right now. Then India was on an 8-match winning streak. Australia were on a 10-match winning streak when they reached the final. And this time around, India is on a 10-match winning streak in 2023. And Australia is on an 8-match winning streak, in this edition of the World Cup. 20 years later, lots to settle. Lots of scores to settle. I think it will be a good contest between bat and ball at the Motera wicket. That particular wicket holds good. So, a toss wouldn't be such a crucial factor there. But we can see exciting, round of cricket between bat and ball, between two quality sides who have performed supremely well in this edition of the tournament.
Indeed. So it's 20 years from 1983 was 2003, and it's 20 years from 2003 today. So let's hope for the best then. Thanks very much, Arnold Thomas, for being with us. That's all we have in this edition of DD India News Hour, but let's know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Mark Lynn from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India News Hour. Namaskar.